We just flew to the dark side of the moon a few months ago. I think some architects, engineers, and designers know how to install netting and certain things that won't reach cars or reach children inside or outside the ballpark. Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming back to another recording of Foul Ball Safety Now Talks. I'm Jordan Scott. I'm with Brianna Ludwig. We're coming towards the end of June 2026, middle of the baseball season. I'm excited to bring on our guest host in a few minutes. I usually like to start off with how Foul Ball Safety Now started and all things that have been happening since 2019 and bring up some news updates, and then we'll have a really interesting discussion. So basically, Foul Ball Safety Now started back in 2019. I'm a huge baseball fan. I was just watching some morning news and I saw something very disturbing. And from that moment on, I started making some noise about this issue. I even called the Yankees and the Mets right away with a grand gesture because if the New York teams can do it, like extend nets and provide drastic improvements, then everyone could do it. So, yes, I don't think the Yankees and the Mets were really interested in hearing from me. It's like going over to your neighbor's house and saying, hey, since you can't afford to put a garage silencer on your door, whatever. Nobody likes to be told to take care of their own house. Like, we don't need you. We don't need your charity, that kind of thing. I kind of like then took a step back and I found somebody by the name of Brendan who's been with me all this time. So, from tracking what was happening on the major league level, from learning about what's been happening at all of their affiliates, from learning what's happening at all of the independent leagues, and even in the last year plus, learning about what's happening at colleges. And now, since getting involved with colleges and getting some calls periodically from parents or people that own houses in areas next to high schools. A high school parent called me a while back, probably about a year and a half ago, and said, "Hey, I'm in White House, Tennessee," and I've been mentioning White House, Tennessee quite a bit, which is actually a city in Tennessee, and a parent said, "We can't have soccer and baseball going on simultaneously," and I heard his story, and I was glad that at least they are now discussing the matter, what's happening in their own neighborhood. A family in Illinois, a gentleman called me up and mentioned that he's been dealing with this problem for about a decade. He has a house, it's by a high school field, and he's concerned because his kids can't just play in the yard. And he is upset with the community for not taking care of the issue because during practices and games, his kids are not freely able to play outside. Our guest host is going to bring some interesting thoughts about that after we introduce her, I'm sure. So he said when he went to the community board, one of the members mentioned, like, hey, you should have known, like, buying a house next to a baseball field is like buying a house next to a pig farm in a different way. You'll smell the scent, or you should have known that this was part of the deal. Similar to buying a house near a field, you should have known that balls may hit your home. But I disagree with that analogy because there's plenty of professional baseball cities. We mentioned the 30 major league teams. There's clearly 120 minor league teams that are affiliated with the billionaire major league teams. Some of these 120 teams are owned by those owners of those 30 teams. And people like Brianna, who are parents of young children, should know exactly where to park the car without strings attached. Similar, when you're buying a house, you should not have strings attached of like, hey, balls could be hitting your house all the time. And that's part of the deal. I think what I just mentioned about Modesto, which people can see on the website of Foul Ball Safety Now, got contacted by a lawyer. It's inevitable that balls will either hit the pavement or the window. In this case, it hit the lady in the head. It's the owner's responsibilities to tell people there are strings and conditions attached to parking in the parking lot, and we're gonna make certain steps so Brianna can come to the game unconditionally with her baby and not worry about where to park. And similar to the person who owns the home in Illinois, it should have been the responsibility of the developer or the previous owner to state that this is definitely part of the situation. And unfortunately, this family is going to have a longer fight ahead of them. And certainly, they're going to have some sort of ethical issue in their own minds when they're ready to sell their house. And they probably are ready yesterday because they're tired of this, whether they were going to reveal to the next owner of exactly what the situation is. So it brings up really interesting questions, and we're excited to dive in with our guest shortly. So Brendan and I have interviewed more than 80 people, people or victims, baseball players. We've learned about three new situations, two from this year. Bats are still making their way over nets at professional ballparks. Balls are still making their way over nets at professional ballparks. There's always been conditions and strengths attached to the game experience. 2026, unfortunately, we remain in the dark ages. Brianna and I discovered self reported injuries in 2025. And we're about to do our mid-season report, and we're going to dive in to all the data of self-reported injuries. In 2025, Brianna and I found 45 self-reported injuries on places like TikTok, where you could actually see fresh bruises of people that got slammed. Sometimes they're recording their moment as it's just happened, or sometimes it's at their home, and some of them have clearly testified they're never going back to another game again, and it's horrific. A woman who Brendan and I spoke with, her video actually went very viral. She had, like, either 17 million views or 27 million views. Her friend had the phone on while she got hit, and she spoke to local media in Seattle, and she was very kind to give Brendan and I a 30-minute interview. Brendan's been with me all this time. Brianna's been with me now for around a year and a half. She's been part of these recordings. She does great research, communications, and she's definitely been very important. People like Brendan and Brianna are dedicating their part-time to this experience of foul ball safety now, and I appreciate that. They could be doing other things with their part-time work, and they're very important because we're collecting data, and data is important. Brendan and I are producing our first book about a little-known situation. Nothing's changed on the major league level because almost 10 years ago, a little girl and her mom got hit by a bat. There's a video of this on ESPN. You could actually see the bat going over there was no netting at the time, and I hope there's netting now, but there was no netting. You could see the bat going over into the stands, and it hit the mom and the kid. The kid had to go to the emergency room, and from that moment, that family was alone. One of these teams, which I'm not gonna mention at the moment, who have billions and billions of dollars, did not have the team doctor with them at the emergency room, and basically for the next 8 years were on their own. No resources provided by the billionaire owners to make sure this child had everything. Unfortunately, this child grew up nonverbal. Child definitely has special needs, and, it's a longer story. We'll get into that some other time. Brendan and I are producing our first book. Brendan was actually hired by this major law firm who found me. No, it was not reported about, so nobody knows about it. Brendan helped prepare this law firm for their trial because we have a lot of research and data, and at the last minute, there was a settlement, but this case had tons of lawyers on both sides, and there was millions and millions of dollars worth of lawyer fees, and this baby gets basic care for the rest of their life. There was no monetary windfall, but all of this was because there was never a discussion about this needs to be put in place. And these billionaires who own these teams, clearly, they cannot ever show that there was a team of sophistication of architects, engineers, and designers that monitored the situation. certainly since 1970 after a 14-year-old boy got hit and died at Dodger Stadium, and it was 45 years after that they finally put, nets above the dugout. And just to go back to the bat incident with the little kid, bats are still coming over nets in 2026. Yankees, Toronto. If Brianna could pull up the date, she could tell everyone where to find it. But you could actually hear the announcers say, the bat just went over the net. I mean, why are bats still going over nets in 2026? So obviously the teams are not working together. Is it been one guy at MLB wearing too many hats, or has it been a team of architects, engineers, and designers that have constantly been monitoring the situation? I believe it's the former, and that ain't acceptable. And I want to discuss that. And all levels of baseball, we need to talk about these situations. Last one was the T-Mobile bat. America saw it. Nobody said anything in social media. Playoff game last year in 2025, yeah, Seattle versus Detroit. You could actually see the broken bat going over the net, and the announcer saying, "Yikes! Look out!" It was about 2 minutes after it had happened. Nobody knew where the broken bat had gone. But what happens, they go to commercial and you see the announcer as they're showing the replay of the bat coming into the stands, he shouts out, "Yikes, look out." You can see that at Foul Ball Safety Now. And nobody on social media connected the dots like, "Wait, that bat could have speared your heart or neck." Hell yeah, it could have, but I guess it was just the flow of the game and the excitement, and it was just like another additive, another ingredient to, the excitement. You could see that at Foul Ball Safety Now. Go to the T-Mobile tab, and you'll see exactly what I just said. So, Brianna, how are you today?
Doing great, Jordan. Excited to dive into this topic. I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion today. So, without further ado, I'd love to invite on our guest host for the day. She is the executive director of a park district in Illinois. Welcome, Shannon Nazal. Hi, Brianna. Hi, Jordan.
Hey, Shannon. Thanks so much for being around today. We're excited to talk with you.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Sure.
It is really exciting to join as guest host today. So I'm excited to have our conversation.
We are ready. We are so welcoming people's interest, and thank you so much for getting involved with us today.
Yeah, of course. So, as someone who works in parks and recreation, I spend a ton of time thinking about things like public spaces, risk management, and creating great experiences for our communities. So, what I'd really love today in taking our conversation is a little bit beyond the big leagues and explore how that spectator safety applies to, like you mentioned, colleges, high schools and public facilities where so many people experience the game. And I think it'll really be an interesting perspective.
Terrific.
I would like to start in the realm of college and high school. So, you talked a little bit about that in your introduction, how you're starting to get more feedback on those different aspects outside of Major League Baseball, coming down to the community level, right? So, how different does the discussion become when you start looking at college and high school baseball in comparison to major leagues?
Great. And it really just came on the horizon, I would say, at the beginning of 2025. So I guess I'm at this for about 7 years this summer. So when a Queens College student contacted me and he said, "Hey, Jordan, we're concerned that balls are going over the side. There's an elementary school and these kids can get hit." And I said, "That's very legitimate, and you should be concerned." And on the website of Foul Ball Safety Now, 5 letters were written out to the Queens College administration. Not in the tone of like, "You're the only offenders," because Brianna and I are learning things, and we had sense at the time that they weren't the only offenders. So people can see at Foul Ball Safety Now, the 5 letters we wrote to the Queens College administration. And on the 4th letter, a Queens College student reporter had the courage to call the athletic director, and you got a quote. And we even contacted the NCAA to let them know at the beginning of this year, because this is going on now a year, the letter writing campaign. And now they're in on it because we did a simple search Brianna and I did D1, D2, and D3, just 46, because there's a ton more college players than there are on professional players, and there's probably a ton and tons more high school players than there are college players. I'll just break it down real quick. 900 MLB players, about 5,000 to 8,000 professional players that make a salary. They're minor leagues and things like that. Not they don't make major money. Then there's 35 to 50,000 college players. So there's probably hundreds of thousands of high school players. So obviously, communities like yours are affected by it. So we believe that the psychological well-being of certainly the student athlete at college at these 46 fields are being altered. They're being messed around with. They're not getting a chance to play the game free and clear. And they want to play the game free and clear, and you can't blame them. But unfortunately, previous generations haven't made it easier for them because they went through it and they just bit their tongue. They didn't say anything. And maybe they told their own parents, and the parents didn't say anything because they didn't want to, upset the apple cart and jeopardize the child's journey for being, labeled as a troublemaker of some kind. But it's time to speak up. It's not right. And high school level, I'm open to discussing all levels now since the Queens College student came on the horizon, and I'm getting the random calls from the high school parent that I mentioned in White House and the person from Illinois who bought a house next to a field. I know there are solutions out there, and you're probably trying to find them, and I want to talk about them. Yeah.
So, do you think that one of the issues is students not being able to speak up, like, say, somebody at a professional ball game would? Do you think that's an extra risk or added issue that compounds the situation because you're dealing with folks that are potentially not as apt to having those tough conversations?
Yeah. So I have a courtship with the baseball world because I offer incentive for students and college players and professional players to organize conferences amongst their peers. So, for example, my ad on Indeed will say $50 an hour, wanted baseball players and coaches to organize conferences with baseball players and coaches. Now, I've had that post on and off for like the last 5, 6 months, and I've probably had north of 50 conversations with these baseball players and coaches who are telling me these things, that they have anxiety when they swing the bat, or on kids' nights, my feelings really spike. Let's say it's a kids' theme night at one of these minor league baseball games. They're worried because they know their balls are going into exposed areas. They know their own parents have been informed about the places to be sitting, but nobody else really has been, similar to parking the car in the parking lot. One of these students said to me, "Jordan, it's unspoken. We don't park there." I'm like, "Really? It's unspoken not to park in that spot because the balls will find its way to that car or that parking spot." And yes, human beings do get out of cars and go in cars, and Brianna or anyone else should be concerned. So, they don't speak. They usually come to me with a lot of enthusiasm, at least on the first call. Out of these 50 calls I've had at Shannon, I had 3 conferences. I had another one about 2 weeks ago where they brought a
Okay.
handful of their people. So it's a start. People are
Yeah.
talking, and I'm excited that people are opening up.
That actually is very interesting to me. The point of the students participating in that, I think that's an excellent point, and I didn't really think of it that way, but that's great that you have folks being able to speak up about that and letting you know about things like don't park there. And we hear that all the time too with some of our facilities in regards to, okay, well, don't park there, or there's a sign there that says this. But it's interesting to hear it outside of my world.
Yes, it's refreshing, and that's what we're doing, and young people, we all desire to play the game with no strings and conditions attached to it. Nobody wants to go to a game as a player and hurt anyone. When it comes to the Major League Players Union, going from amateur and local to back to the professional level, there's probably been 3 or 4 separate times where the Major League Players Union, Brendan and I have discovered that it came up in collective bargaining. So that's when they renegotiate their contract and they
Mhm.
want certain things. It came up, but really, how hard did MLB Players Union fight for it? Because they should have said, and now their rank and file is so much larger. It used to just be 30 major league teams. A few years ago, all of their affiliates are now members, so their
Right.
membership may be 5 times as large. Young adults aspiring to be Major League Baseball players are all conflicted. I wanna know why the MLB Players Union didn't say it's time to bring in an outside agency. They could figure it out. We just flew to the dark side of the moon a few months ago. I think some architects, engineers, and designers know how to install netting and certain things that won't reach cars or reach children inside or outside the ballpark. Let's
Sure.
figure it out. It starts with a conversation, and there's billions and billions of dollars. So if all of a sudden people start seeing things, retractable nets that go up to the sky and then they come down at the end of the night, so people won't be getting hit anymore. Or Brianna being given a roadmap exactly. This is where you park, this is how you go in and sit, and this is where you get up and have a snack and go back to your seat and sit, and like la di da di da. When people start saying, you need to pay attention, you need to get off your phone, no tender moments with your loved one, kids can't play patty cake. No, I'm sorry. You should be sitting in your seat and you should have a free and safe and clear experience. We're not action figures and superheroes. Paying attention is not a solution to not getting hit by a ball. There's billions of dollars out there. Can you get in a room and then the 3 of us can go out to lunch and let them work it out? I think that's possible, Shannon.
So, talking about the billions of dollars,
Yes.
right? So, when you look at whether it's minor leagues or some colleges, like maybe in the D3s, I mean, the D1s, that's a completely different literal ball game, right? But when you look at D3 or you're looking at high schools, does that present a different challenge with those, say, older facilities and tighter budgets where a lot of school districts or municipal governments and that sort of thing, a lot of times parks and recreation or ball field items aren't on the top priority list because they're, say, looking at we need to make sure that our STEM program is the highest priority for our limited budget for taxpayer dollars. How does that tie in to make sure that it is on the safety perspective when it comes to budgeting for those improvements?
Well, of course, and again, maybe this will come into a different category, and maybe it'll be me who's one of the spearhead guys and somebody else who says, "Hey, Jordan, I think this is the direction and the approach we need to take on all local zip codes." But the fact is we don't have to live in a society where balls are constantly reaching the street, where cars are passing. We don't have to live in a society where young people are indoctrinated into staying silent because they tell their moms and dads that they'll do. Mom, dad, you need to park there. Mom, dad, you need to sit there. But nobody else has that same memo. Nobody else has that same inside information. And I don't think we have to accept just because the status quo has been getting through year to year to year. No major influencer's child, was hit by a ball. Fortunately, not. But if they were, they'd probably find me in 5 minutes and say, "Jordan, move over. We need to make some noise." And I'm like, "Of course, I'm trying. I'm trying to sustain 7 years of trying to effectively start a conversation." And again, if the billionaires ever figured out their own house, magic would start happening and fast. There's architects, engineers, and designers in every zip code, and they would love nothing else but the challenge of making that particular park or that particular facility into a civilized society. Right now, we're in baseball, uncivilized society. I say that because you know now, Shannon, that it's inevitable. It's not if the next person's going to be smacked, it's when. And that's all preventable. We just flew to the dark side of the moon. Let's do something on planet Earth. And again, some people may say this is pie in the sky. No, I'm learning that young people are expressing themselves. They're not playing the game free and clear. They deserve that right. We failed. We never did it. We never paved the way for the young player coming up at all levels to have that opportunity. So I'm up for all challenges. If young people are telling me I'm stressed out every swing I have anxiety. Well, you know what? It doesn't adhere to the NCAA, the NCAA rule book. You'll see my 5 letters at the website. Clearly, the psychological well-being of the student athlete is not being adhered to. It's black and white. It's not being adhered to, administration. Now, let's talk about every zip code and let's make it happen. And that's okay. It's a beginning. And that's what we're doing. And maybe it'll happen rapidly once I meet a fellow committed person like myself who's got 10 times as more cash than I may have because I've rented out airplanes and made statements and I've been to court, but there's plenty of courts and filings and airplanes to rent out, and I'm happy to pass on the torch or contribute to the next chapter of this conversation. It's exciting.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's very cost effective to educate people. So even if a certain district or school or facility feels that they don't have funding to necessarily extend their netting or fix the problem, it's free to educate people and put out materials either on social media about, this issue and the risks that they're taking when they go to the ballpark, letting them know that they're not protected, that their children aren't protected, that they can't guarantee the safety, letting them know where to park. They can still put that information for a very cost-effective price. I think that's a good point, Brianna. And one of my thoughts was when you look at what the folks in the major leagues are looking at as their most important priorities that they have to get to, it's finding where that fits in that realm of things. So if you have your youth, you have your high school, you have your college, not all of them are going to end up playing for the Yankees, right? But looking at it, they will either be a baseball fan for life or something is going to pull them away. And looking at the major league teams, you'd think that having that fan base and that fan base be safe throughout would be very important for them to potentially do some of that outreach. Has that ever come up with any of the major league teams about them grassrooting some of those efforts?
To do that, it's almost acknowledging an admission of guilt. And what I see from the little limited information, I could all tell you in 3 or 4 minutes all the things that the commissioner has said representing the owners over the last 7 years on netting. It really only takes a minute to go through it, but it's just generally stocked responses, and the baseball media themselves, they are not going deeper on this issue. They are not willing to commit to getting to the root and staying with the conversation. We have new information all the time about new people that are entering. We call it the less than 1% injured club because there's 100 million baseball fans. There's probably not been a million people over the last 100 years that have had life-altering experiences, but there've been thousands upon thousands upon thousands, and that's, yes, less than 1%, and every year there's new entries into that less than 1% category. That's because there's millions of fans. It wouldn't be tolerated if we were walking down a major street in New York and 40 rocks are coming down, every week. Everyone knows that would be an inevitable hit. We wouldn't have a society like that. Why do we have a baseball society like that? Baseball knew since 1913 there's something called the baseball rule. And once there's an act of Congress and that's abolished, most states recognize this baseball rule. So they knew in 1913, in a dark way, they knew the maiming could commence. People will be hit and they won't even be able to find lawyers. They knew that. It was inevitable. We have something called Exhibit A1 at Foul Ball Safety now. That was a published report from 2019. Brendan and I incorporated very solid research into that report, and we made it into one. It demonstrates just how many foul balls there are per year. It demonstrates the hot zones, similar to where these little children were sitting just past end of dugout and getting hit in 2019. Part of that 5-minute video we have at the website, we call that one Exhibit A. And you can almost retrace your steps. You're gonna learn hundreds of thousands of foul balls, and almost half of them going into some hot zone. There was an estimation of 53 foul balls per game. Brendan and I cut it in half to 25. We didn't wanna make it like we were inflating the number at all. If anything, people would say, "Jordan, you were generous for not going harder." But you know what? It's hard enough, because if you multiply 14,000 games a year, not even including MLB, but it's basically 200-pound guys hitting balls, whether they're making 20 bucks an hour or $1 million a year, they're hitting it hard. 14,000 games a year times 25 foul balls. That's 350,000 foul balls a year going inside and outside ballparks. And maybe said close to 50% of them go into those hot zones. Some of those balls are going at 100. MLB can trace from the last decade or two just how many were going at 100, and they could apply that to those 14,000 games, more or less. People are gonna start connecting dots. That's what we do here, Shannon. We're excited
Mhm.
to keep on bringing conversation.
Yeah, no, the data is super important. I think having as much data is, I mean, that tells the story. Looking at some of the examples that you've seen of where there have been any improvements, I would love to hear your thoughts on where you have seen some of these communities or colleges or any of the teams that you've seen, of where you've seen something done particularly well.
Yes, so on the community level, I have very limited knowledge, but there's 10,000 more baseball fields that, I'm just scratching the surface. But I'm happy to stay with learning more about that, about what's happening on the professional level. All I can say is clearly we've seen improvements, but improvements are not solutions. Balls are still making their way over nets. I still believe that MLB and professional baseball never had a full-time team of architects and engineers and designers monitored the situation since 1970 when a 14-year-old boy got hit at Dodger Stadium and died. A lawyer of mine, Lynn, her girlfriend Jenny, was introduced to me a few years ago when she was blinded by a baseball in 1979 as a 14-year-old. And it has a chilling effect on the generational effect for Jenny and her family, because she told me years after she was blinded in New York in '79, she was the mother of an 8-year-old who was playing Little League Baseball, and she was outwardly nervous about him playing, and probably because of what happened to her, and the 8-year-old ended up quitting baseball, and I believe because his mother made him feel nervous, and maybe that 8-year-old is now 30, and maybe he's telling his own child, "You don't wanna play ball. Look what happened to your grandmother." that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
those families, those less than one percenters, they're scarred. Those 99 percenters that never got memo, they always thought it was wholesome, no strings attached, unconditional, good times and fun. They'll realize, I believe, certainly when Brendan and I produce our first book about the baby, we believe that those 99 percenters will be open and be empathetic and sympathetic, and they'll be like, that could have been us. So it's really all about education. Nobody wants to go to a parking lot or inside a ballpark and be part of that less than 1% injured club. Nobody was looking for that. Nobody expected
Right.
that. And that should not be. And once you're at your seat and they give you warnings, last I checked, we're not superheroes and action figures. We're not meant to be there. People can check out that 5-minute video that we call Exhibit A. You'll see there's still cities, professional cities in the United States that don't have netting past end of dugouts. So unfortunately, MLB, very slow. And it's if they get into the room, a lot of prosecutorial voices will come at them, and it won't be me, it'll be us going out to lunch. We just wanna breathe life into this issue, and we're excited. We want others to be inspired to address the guys that have been perpetuating foul ball and good times. That's what nine-year-olds look forward to. Their dream is to catch a foul ball. We need to get to the next chapter and let the history, if it becomes a discussion, let people interpret what they believe. But I believe people will retrace their steps once they look at Exhibit A1 and demonstrated how many foul balls were going into those hot zones. And they're going to realize, wait, didn't we go there 3 times a year over the last 10 years? That was 30 times. Did we ever have any close calls? Oh, yeah, there were 1 or 2 where somebody's popcorn popped, a ball hit it, and everyone had a nervous giggle. Nobody left. Nobody associated those near misses could have been direct hospital hits. That's all we do. That's all we just wanna do. Nobody ever left, Shannon, after somebody's beer exploded. Everyone has a giggle and a nervous laughter. Most cases, nobody went home. Yes, of course, there are gonna be direct hits, and that's what we are doing. We're following the matter.
Yeah, and even with nets in place, I think I saw something not too long ago about, a guy right behind home plate that his beer got popped. There was a net there, so even sometimes with those protections there, I mean, it's still depending on how fast that ball is going, you don't know how protective it is. And from a fan's perspective, what should families make sure to keep in mind when they're attending a ball game, whether it's they're watching their high school kid or they're watching a college game or going to one of the big fields. What should they be looking at in making sure that they're as safe as they can be with the current situation?
I can't really give a short answer of that. It's above my pay grade, but I would say we had a previous guest on who was not necessarily pushing back, but she's going to the game knowing a lot more than most fans. She came on, her husband was a season ticket holder who goes to many games, and she was saying, "We'll just go to the games and we'll keep everything that we've learned recently in mind." That's us connecting with people one on one. You may
Mhm.
now be more informed on a common sense, level about this is what I will do when I go to the game. But balls are still making their way over the nets. Just yesterday, I saw a visual. The home run ball is the home run ball. Now, whether we have a discussion about that, there's no nets, as far as I know, at any professional ballparks when it comes to stopping the home run ball. I saw a picture of an infant with a mother or a father or a human being holding the baby, and the ball was just like a foot away, and she was just like turning away with her baby. And these balls exit velocity over 100 miles an hour, and they come at you very hard at times when you're behind the fence. And
Mhm.
there's no restrictions. Management is not giving out any serious literature. It's always been in micro print. We've been disrespected as a baseball society. They told you legally we're not responsible, and they did that in microprint. If they put that in large letters, then we would have studied the matter a little longer. Nobody ever looked at it. Everyone, oh, that's the microprint. This was years ago before the e-ticket. Would anyone take out a magnifying glass before they go to a game
Right.
and then start putting clues together about the inevitable? Yeah, we know that there are going to be new entries all the time, new disruption for families they did not expect. And I'm excited to dive in more about how we could definitely get involved with all zip codes and figure it out. There's architects, engineers, and designers that need to get involved who are doing very well in life, and they would be serving, I'm sure, as free consultants. Their kids probably play baseball in that particular zip code. And I'm happy to inspire them. And if it means reconfiguring a little here or there, or nets higher here or there, we just flew to the dark side of the moon. I'm using that one a lot. I don't know why, but we have a few months ago, and we can change. Somebody needs to go to the store and get some more nets. And it'll be and the guy who's purchasing it is the committee that we inspired, that's all of a sudden now addressing that particular facility. And no more strings and conditions attached to the baseball experience. And I'm excited to keep on talking about it. And I'm hoping somebody comes back to me and tells me about the model experience. So then, of course, I can go back to you sooner rather than later and say, hey, look what I found in this zip code in the United States. They figured it out. But until somebody tells me something, I think all fields are compromises, all zip codes are compromised. And again, I got involved on a major league, on a professional level. Now we're just scratching the surfaces on colleges and hearing from people like you in local communities. So we're excited. I'm happy to be part of another discussion with more people.
No, I really appreciate this conversation. It's very eye opening, and looking at it from all of the different levels, I think is really important for any baseball fan, any baseball parent, anyone that's involved in the community on how they can not only work with trying to figure things out at the major league level, but how they can also impact their own communities and making sure that the areas around them are as safe as possible for their kids, which is great. We do a lot of things here that are one of the high schools around us has a net on the side of the field that is next to a roadway
Mhm.
to make sure that those balls don't get into the roadway. When that was brought up, it was something that a lot of folks weren't sure why that was needed, but luckily that was something that ended up being passed and put forward, because it's absolutely a safety component. And even though sometimes those things aren't as aesthetically pleasing as possible, it's the safety again is very important, I think. And I appreciate your work and going through this. And what do you think 5 years from now? What would you hope to see?
Wow. Well, I mean, I'm hoping one day I get a chance to meet Judge Flanagan from Illinois. There was a case called Rybarski versus White Sox in 2018. She ruled that she implied the White Sox had knowledge, willful wanton conduct, meaning they knew in advance of the year that this was potentially going to happen. And obviously, she's an influencer. That case ended up being settled. It was Rybarski versus White Sox. I was involved in a case in Illinois as well around Peoria. That's when I hired the lawyer. We were in court. We went a few rounds from July of 23 to July of 24. And at the time, Peoria Chiefs were an affiliate of the St. Louis Cardinals worth billions of dollars. I even got a call from the general counsel of the St. Louis Cardinals. The call was less than 90 seconds long. He was kind of feeling me out. The Cardinals pay the salaries of the Peoria Chiefs. And you would think that the Peoria Chiefs would have netting above the dugout, but they didn't have netting above the dugout even till 2020 till the start of the season 2025, almost 6 years after that horrific video from ESPN. And I felt like it was an opportunity to go to court. We had a plaintiff by the name of Sandy. We needed Greg, the lawyer that I worked with, said we needed a plaintiff, and we found somebody who Brendan and I had interviewed who agreed to be a witness. She fortunately was more psychological than physical, her long term. She hadn't been back to the game in a decade. So there's definitely people that are thinking about it in Illinois, and I'm certainly going to be around to try to get us out of the dark ages because I think our conversation is simply 101 and let's go where the conversation needs to go. And if we inspire other thought leaders or inspire new thinking, of people who never thought about it in a way where it's affecting the players psychologically, clearly is because I'm inviting them into these forums and they're opening up. I've only had 3 forums, but I've had 50 conversations. So I learn a lot, and people are opening up to me for the first time. People can see those quotes at the website. I have something on the website called A New Baseball Statistic, Present Traumatic Stress Disorder. Present Traumatic Stress Disorder? Well, I don't know what else to call it. Players are telling me they're freaking out. I'm like, yeah, that's pleasant. All right, present. So that's why I called it that. People, please read of A New Baseball Statistic because I'm speaking with people and they're opening up. We want the young people to play the game free and clear. They should not be conflicted. And we should have done a lot better. I want an optimistic present and future in baseball. So I wouldn't look 5 years ahead. I'm just going to keep talking and we'll have a new conversation. And you're always invited, Shannon, to speak with us again. Is that okay?
That's that's wonderful. Thanks again for the opportunity, Jordan.
Oh, thank you so much. Brianna, do you have a question for Shannon?
Yeah, Shannon, when you are designing or overseeing these public spaces, what are your biggest priorities and what do you think the MLB and others should be thinking about when designing their ballparks?
Ooh, that's a good one. So, biggest priorities. So, working in Parks and Recreation, a lot of our work is based on community input and what the community is looking to accomplish, right? So, a lot of our priorities fall around one, what the community is looking for, two, what is actually feasible to do. And then we also have to look at safety, and we're looking at things like traffic control. We're looking at where are people actually going to congregate, what is our ingress and egress. Then last on the list sometimes, sometimes for some people it's more, some people it's less, is of course the cost of any facility, right? But those are all things that we look at when we're building a capital project or we're redeveloping something or redesigning something.
Terrific. Terrific explanation. We really want to thank our guest Shannon today and Brianna, and we'll be doing it again soon, everyone. Thanks again.